The Red Keep burned less than a year ago. Ash still coated the stones like old memories. The people whispered of queens who came with dragons, kings who left in chains, and a girl no one really remembered. No one, because that's what she became. Arya Stark had returned to Westeros with 1,000 faces, but none of her own. Her family believed she had gone west beyond the maps. That lie served her well. Arya of Winterfell had left the world quietly. But no one. She had just begun. It started in the streets of King's Landing, among the broken, half-starved, forgotten souls. She moved like a shadow, watching the lords gather once more in the ruins of the small council chamber, pretending the realm could be glued back together. They crowned Bran the Broken. Peace, they said, a new age. But the same lords still whispered, still schemed. No lessons were learned, just new games played under different banners. Arya listened, observed, waited. She wore faces like armor. A washerwoman, a rat-catcher, a silent scribe in the Grand Maester's hall. Each role gave her something, secrets, alliances, weaknesses. They saw only what she wanted them to see. None ever looked twice. She was, after all, no one. Her first kill was Lord Wensfield, a minor noble with a major appetite for children. His death went unnoticed, a slip on a wet stair. His secrets vanished with him. The second was Lady Castleine of Oldtown, who trafficked poison across the Reach and had plotted to kill Bran before the coronation. Her heart stopped in her sleep. Arya didn't flinch. She kept the list in her mind, but this time it was not. Names she hated. These were not personal, these were threats. When she stood in front of the Iron Throne for the first time, it had already begun rusting from disuse. Bran ruled from the chambers behind it, choosing not to sit where so much blood had soaked into steel. Arya stood beneath the swords, invisible, in a servant's face, listening to Lord Royce argue with Ser Davos about food shortages. She realized then, peace was a word the powerful used to numb the desperate. The realm wasn't healing. It was waiting for the next tyrant, the next rebellion, the next fire. The wheel still turned. That night, she lit a candle before the altar of the many-faced god, not in Braavos but in the belly of the ruined sept of Baelor. She knelt in silence, her own face laid on the stone before her, carved from memory. Arya Stark, the girl who ran with wolves, the sister, the daughter. She would never wear it again. That same week, Bran was found dead. His body was whole, untouched, but his face bore an expression of peace so strange it frightened even the Maesters. Ravens flew. The realm mourned. Some blamed illness. Some whispered poison. No one knew. Arya watched from the shadows as they gathered to choose a new ruler once again. Her face was new this time, a pale-eyed girl from the Stormlands. She listened as voices rose in panic. Without Bran, the council fractured. The Vale pushed for independence, the Riverlands for democracy. The Reach threatened war unless their grain was bought at double value. The realm teetered. She struck quickly. 3 more lords died, 2 in their sleep, 1 at dinner with his mistress. Panic spread, but no one suspected the same hand. She was many. She was none. And then came the vote. They wanted a ruler who could end the chaos. A neutral figure. A symbol. Someone with no claim, no army, no blood in the game. She stepped forward wearing the face of a girl once saved by Jon Snow during the Long Night. They remembered her, believed her noble, innocent, unambitious. She was chosen by majority. On the day she was crowned, Arya stood before the realm cloaked in pale grey, the sun cutting through the stained glass like blood. They called her Queen Elenya of House Ardent, a name she made up on the spot. But behind that face, behind the voice and grace and stillness, Arya Stark no longer existed. Only no one ruled now. They cheered for her as Queen Elenya, the savior of the realm, the quiet balance between chaos and tradition. They thought her humble, untainted, gentle, a ruler who wouldn't cling to power or lust for war. They had no idea she wasn't real. Arya, what remained of her, watched from behind borrowed eyes as the court swelled with empty praise. The lords offered her gifts. The Meisters pledged loyalty, and the small council tried to guide her, not realizing she was guiding them. She nodded politely, smiled when required, rarely spoke. The less she said, the more they believed she was wise. But in the quiet of her chambers, she removed the face, stared into the mirror, and found only skin stretched over silence. No memories looked back, no roots. Arya Stark had died somewhere on the road west, where she told the sea she'd find new lands. But the sea had only swallowed her name. Now she ruled the realm, a realm that didn't know her. That had failed. Her father beheaded her brother, burned her sister, broken her childhood. She would not fail it in return. Her first decree was disarmament, not of soldiers but of whispers. The network of spies that Varys once held had been shattered, but others had risen in his absence. Spiderlings of every kind, some loyal to coin, some to old houses, some to darker gods. She made them vanish, slowly, systematically. Each week, a body washed up along the Blackwater, faces carved with a dagger in a symbol no one understood, except her, Vala Morghulis. But she didn't kill for vengeance anymore. This was cleansing. The filth that rotted the realm from the inside had to be scrubbed away. Then came Sansa, queen in the north. She arrived at the capital weeks after the coronation, red hair flowing like fire over fresh snow. Her expression was unreadable, but Arya knew her well enough to catch the flicker in her eye. The moment recognition tried to surface and died just behind her brow. They met in the throne room, empty save for the two of them. "I know you," Sansa said softly. Elenya tilted her head, offering a vague smile. "We all wear faces, Your Grace, some heavier than others." Sansa stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "No, I know you." Arya's pulse didn't shift. She had trained for this, bled for it, killed herself again and again in the darkness of Braavos until nothing could reach her. And yet, this was Sansa. A part of her stirred, just for a moment. "I'm afraid you're mistaken," Arya replied, evenly. "But I do admire your strength. The North is lucky to have you." Sansa didn't believe her. Arya saw it, but she said nothing more. Perhaps she was afraid. Perhaps she was unsure. Or maybe she didn't want to believe the girl she once knew had become this. The visit was brief. Sansa returned to Winterfell, and Arya watched. Her go from the highest tower in the Red Keep. That night she didn't sleep. Something inside her itched. Not guilt. She didn't have that anymore, but something colder. Something like loss. She tried to forget it. She focused on rebuilding the realm. She cut taxes, redistributed food, empowered local magistrates instead of noble-appointed lords. The common folk began to love her. They called her the Queen of Quiet Hands. Songs were sung of her patience and justice. She never raised her voice. She never needed to, because she knew everything. Every betrayal, every theft, every whisper of rebellion. Her faceless agents were everywhere. The guild in Braavos had not forgotten her, only let her go. And now they served her purpose. Justice, she called it, but something was shifting. In the small folk, yes, but also in her own mind. One night she awoke gasping. She had dreamed of her father, of Ned Stark, smiling in Winterfell's courtyard. She was a child again, holding Needle. But when she looked at him, really looked, his face changed. It became her own. Then Sansa's. Then a blur of everyone she'd ever worn. She screamed herself awake. The next day she ordered 10 executions for treason with no trial. The council whispered unease, but obeyed. Power was still hers, yet for the first time she felt it slipping, not from the outside, but from within. The throne was hers. But Arya was unraveling. Winter returned quietly to the capital. It didn't come with fanfare or white cloaks of snow just yet, only wind that cut deeper and nights that seemed longer. Arya, or the queen they called Elenya, felt it not in her bones, but in her thoughts. Her dreams worsened. Faces haunted her, not the ones she wore, but the ones she left behind. Gendry's smile, soft and clumsy. Jon's voice calling her little sister, her mother's weeping, Rob's blood on a wedding floor, and always her own, young, fierce, full of fury, staring back with contempt. The girl, in the dream, asked her, "Who are you?" She didn't answer. In court, her silence was mistaken for wisdom. Nobles tiptoed around her, unsure how much she knew. Fear, it turned out, was a better leash than loyalty. Even her counsel began to fracture beneath the weight of her stillness. Lord Talon of the Stormlands resigned after his son vanished. Lady Erin of Gulltown poisoned herself before questioning. They called her merciful, but those who knew better said nothing at all. She didn't need dragons, she ruled through dread. And yet it wasn't rebellion that concerned her now. It was clarity. One night, as the wind howled through the torn banners above the battlements, she stood before the Iron Throne alone. She hadn't touched it in months. It was a symbol now. Something left behind like Arya Stark. The steel was cold beneath her fingers. She thought of Daenerys, how mad they said she'd become, how justified she'd felt. Fire had been her tool. For Arya, it was silence. Still, she wondered if madness ever knew its own shape while it lived. That was when Sir Randall entered, panting, bloody, eyes wide. "Your Grace," he gasped, "the North. It marches south." Her face didn't change, not even a blink. "Who leads them?" He hesitated. "The Lady of Winterfell and the Bastard of Snow." So Sansa had returned, and Jon. Arya turned away from the throne. "Prepare the gates, let them in." He blinked. "Your Grace?" "I said let them in." She dismissed him with a glance, then returned to the fire burning in the hearth. She watched the flames for a long time. They arrived the next day, under banners of white direwolves and battered black. No army, just 2 riders and a dozen guards. Arya met them in the throne room. She wore a new face, a high-born woman with dark eyes and silver-streaked hair, regal, unfamiliar. But Jon saw through it instantly. "You're not her," he said, his voice hoarse, like he was dragging a ghost behind it. "I never was," Arya replied. Sansa stood beside him. She looked thinner, sharper. Her eyes flicked over the throne, then back to Arya. "You lied. To me. I spared you." Jon stepped forward. "What are you doing here, Arya? This isn't you." "I am no one," she said flatly. "No," Sansa snapped. "You're our sister. You're Arya Stark. And this mask you wear, this reign of fear, it's not justice." Arya's eyes narrowed. "And what would you know of justice? You rule 1 kingdom. I hold 7. Jon's voice was gentler. "We're not here to take it from you. We came because the North is afraid, the people are afraid." "They're alive," she answered. "But they're dying in other ways," he said, in silence, in fear. "That's not the world we fought for." She didn't flinch. "I fought for survival, you fought for glory." "No," he said, stepping closer, his voice cracking. "I fought so children wouldn't grow up watching their fathers beheaded, so they wouldn't have to become you." That cut her. She didn't show it, but it sliced deep. Arya turned away. She didn't want to feel. Not now. But the words stayed. That night she stared into the mirror, holding the face she wore like a mask torn from bone. Her real face, what little of it remained, looked back in flashes. The curve of her cheek, the scar above her eyebrow. Ghosts of a girl long buried. Jon had come to talk, but Sansa had come to challenge. And something told her this time it wouldn't be with swords. Not yet. But soon Jon stayed in the Red Keep under heavy guard, though Arya hadn't ordered them. Her council feared him, feared what his name still meant. "Targaryen," some whispered behind closed doors. "The true heir." But Arya knew Jon. He never wanted the throne, that was the problem. Men like him were dangerous because they didn't want power. They carried no hunger, only righteousness, and righteousness unchecked became revolution. Sansa, however, was different. She didn't push, didn't threaten, didn't call meetings or demand changes. She simply watched, moved through the keep like she'd never left it. Every chamber, every hallway, like it remembered her steps. The servants gravitated toward her. Even Arya's own spies began reporting that the people in the lower city were whispering her name again. The North remembers, but this time the South noticed. Arya kept her face, Queen Elenya, unmoving, graceful, measured, but the quiet was starting to weigh. Even the shadows in her own court shifted like they questioned her. Late one evening, she summoned Jon to her private chamber. He arrived without armor, without fear, just like he always had. His hair had more grey now. His eyes looked older than the wall itself. She sat by the fire, not wearing any face but her own for once. Her real face, tired, bare, and unguarded. He paused at the sight. "You still wear her well," he muttered. Arya looked up slowly. "You knew." "I always did." She stared into the fire. "Do you know how many I've killed since I returned?" "I don't need to," he said, "but I know why." "Do you?" Her voice cracked. "Because I barely do." Jon didn't move. "You never wanted this throne." "No," she whispered. "I just wanted to stop the cycle. To stop it before another mad queen burned children in the street. Before another war took everything. Before another Stark died for someone else's crown." "And yet," he said softly, "you became something just as dangerous." Arya closed her eyes. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the bells of the city rang the hour. Somewhere in the streets, a child cried. It echoed in her bones. "You think I should leave?" she said, not as a question. Jon didn't answer, right away. "I think you're not her anymore, and I don't know what's left of you, but I know this: if you keep wearing faces, one day you'll forget you ever had your own." She looked up then, her eyes glassy. "What if I already have?" Jon stood. "Then come back." "To what?" She laughed bitterly. "Winterfell, family, I have no place there, I never did." "You do," he said, voice firmer now. "Even if it's not as a sister, even if it's not as Arya. You belong somewhere real, not behind masks, not behind thrones." The next day she called the small council. They expected another purge, another decree of silence and order. Instead she spoke, clearly, without a face to hide behind. "I will not wear a crown forged in shadows," she said. "I am stepping down." Gasps filled the chamber. Lady Merrill of Dawn protested first. "Your Grace, please reconsider. The realm—" Arya raised a hand. "The realm doesn't need a ghost to rule it," Lord Peller stammered. "But who will take your place?" She turned her gaze to Sansa, who stood at the edge of the room. "The North remembers, and the South must learn to follow." Sansa said nothing at first. Her eyes betrayed nothing, but her silence was louder than any speech. Later that night, Arya left the Red Keep alone. She wore no disguise. The people watched her pass, quiet and confused. Some bowed, some stared. None knew what she truly was. She passed the throne one final time, didn't touch it, didn't even look. She left through the same gates her father once walked through in chains, but this time she was free. She wasn't no one anymore. But she wasn't Arya either. She was something new, something that didn't need a name to be real. And as she walked into the wind, the snow began to fall. The road out of King's Landing was colder than Arya remembered. The land hadn't healed, not truly. The scars of war still showed in the burned trees, the hollow-eyed children, the fields where crops grew weak in ash-soaked soil. She passed. Villages where her name meant nothing. No queen, no sister, no ghost. Just a traveler with a sword and eyes too old for her face. She welcomed the silence. It felt honest. She didn't ride for Winterfell. Not yet. She couldn't. Sansa had offered. Yes, with a quiet nod, no gloating, no lecture. Just that look, the same one Arya had seen years ago, right before their father's death. A look that said, "I will carry this weight, if you can't." Arya couldn't tell if that made her proud or afraid. Instead, she rode south. Through the riverlands, past the ruins of Harrenhal, where ghosts were thick as mist. She spent a night in a crumbling tower once held by the Frys. She didn't speak, didn't draw her sword. Still, no one dared approach her. There was something in her. Now something not quite human anymore. Not since Bravos. Not since the many-faced god kissed her soul and left a shadow behind. In a tavern near the Trident, she sat alone while music played and laughter danced. No one recognized her. That comforted her more than it should have. She thought of Gendry. Once she might have gone to Storm's End. Might have knocked on that door with blood on her knuckles and asked if he'd waited. But she knew better. She'd let that version of herself die when she first said, "I'm not a lady." And queens didn't get second chances. On the 10th night, she found herself beside a river, her horse gone lame, her fire nothing, more than sputtering coals. She lay back and looked at the stars. She spoke aloud for the first time in days. "Are you proud of me, Father?" The wind didn't answer, but her heart did. No, not proud, not yet. The next morning she walked. No destination, just a way. Each step peeling back the layers. Queen, killer, sister, servant. Each mile stripping her down to the marrow. She wondered if she even had bones left beneath the masks, or if the real Arya had been left in Bravos, burned into wax, traded for silence and death. By dusk, she reached a bridge guarded by Brotherhood. Banners. Not the old Brotherhood, no, this was new, rebuilt from remnants and ideals. Peacekeepers, they claimed. She knew the truth. Mercenaries with prettier words. A guard stepped forward, young, nervous. "Your name?" She hesitated. Old habits screamed to lie, to reach for a face. Instead, she met his eyes and said, "Arya, Stark of Winterfell." He blinked. "The Queen?" "Not anymore." He didn't know what to do with that. "Go on then," he muttered, stepping aside. Arya walked past him, shoulders straight, spine cold. She had spoken her name. She hadn't exploded. The sky hadn't cracked. The world hadn't ended. She was real. A little later, she found herself at a forgotten shrine, half buried, walls crumbled, carved to gods no one prayed to anymore. She lit a single candle, not to the many-faced god, not to the old gods, just to something. A hope, a breath. For the first time in years, she wept. Not because of guilt, but because she had nothing left to pretend. She slept that night under stars with no fire, no disguise, no watchman. And for once the dreams were still. There were no faces. Only snow. Only home. Snow followed her north like a ghost. As Arya crossed into the riverlands again, then the neck, and finally into the frost-bitten fingers of the north, it seemed the land remembered her steps, not with banners or bells, but with silence, the quiet kind that knows your name even when you've forgotten it yourself. She moved alone. She passed inns that bore her family's sigil, rebuilt roads laid by men loyal to the Starks. At one holdfast, an old woman pressed bread into her hand and said, "Winterfell is waiting." Arya didn't correct her. She didn't say she hadn't come for that. But the truth pressed harder with each step. There was nowhere else left to go. When the walls of Winterfell finally rose over the horizon, half draped in white and silver under the late snow, she stopped on the ridge above. For hours she just stared, watching the smoke curl from the chimneys, the guards pacing, the gates opening and closing like a breathing lung. She hadn't seen it in years, not truly, not as herself. And now she would walk through those gates, with no mask, no title, just Arya. They let her in without question. Some bowed, some stared, but no one spoke. Sansa was waiting in the great hall, dressed in dark grey furs, her crown modest, her expression unreadable as always. She dismissed the others and stood alone by the hearth when Arya entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sansa said, very quietly, "It's good to see you." Arya didn't answer with words. She stepped forward and embraced her. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't warm, it was real. And that was enough. They talked long into the night, of the South, of power, of the faces she'd worn and the ones she buried. Sansa listened. She didn't judge. And when Arya asked if there was a place for her here, not as a queen or a killer or a legend, but as a sister, Sansa nodded once and said, "There always was." So Arya stayed. Not in the great chambers or the high towers. She didn't sit in councils or dine with lords. She lived near the old forge in a small room with a narrow bed and trained children in swordplay when they dared to ask. She spoke little, but her presence brought peace. They called her Lady of Shadows. Not out of fear, but respect. She became something different, not ruler, not ghost, just a Stark. Winter deep came and went. Spring followed. One night, she stood by the godswood, hand resting on the trunk of the ancient weirwood tree. She whispered names again, not ones she wanted revenge on, but ones she wanted to remember. Her father, her brothers, Yorin, Sirio, Gendry, and finally, herself, Arya. It didn't echo, but it stayed. Later that year, a girl from Dawn arrived with eyes full of fire, claiming she wanted to serve, to fight, to become something more. Arya took her in, taught her, not the way the House of Black and White had taught, no riddles, no punishments, only truth, only purpose. You don't need a mask to be powerful, Arya told her. You just need to know who you are, and the girl asked her, do you? Arya paused, then smiled. I do now. Somewhere far beyond the sea, the House of Black and White still whispered of the girl who became no one, and then became more. But in the north, among the wolves and snow, she was Arya Stark again, and for once that was enough.